I'm here with Garret Price, and he is the director of this new fantastic HBO documentary, Yacht Rock. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Meredith. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I didn't want to have any expectations because there have been some other documentaries done about Yacht Rock. And so I kind of wanted to start watching this and to see where your vision and everybody else's vision was going to take this. And I have to say, this is incredibly well done and well pieced together. And the way that you connected the dots and connected everybody, it was really cool to see.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. That was really important to me in going and making this. You know, I was so fascinated by the interconnectivity of all these artists.
Yeah.
Relatively, it's a small group of musicians that were making this sound in Southern California at this time period, and they were all friends and they all played on each other's albums. So I wanted to get that out of the way right at the beginning and kind of set the stage for the story. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's cool that you started out with the Steely Dan aspect. I got to be honest with you. It took me a while, probably until, my early 40s to appreciate Steely Dan, but to see how you in this documentary uh, you know, highlighted Steely Dan and started to do the web effect out of how they influenced and impacted all of these artists that were to come after them, and then it was this like unbelievable web that spun out to be this cool yacht rock genre. That was wild. And then what you did, and I don't want to give anything away, what you did at the end with the Donald Fagen phone call had me rolling.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. I love that we built up the mythology of Donald Fagen and then he just tears it all down at the end. So I don't want to give away here. So it's a lot of fun. But in the end, I think it's a wink from him saying, I get it. I
Yep.
don't know if I love it, but I get it, and I got to use his music in the movie. So I think a movie like this is only as strong as the songs you're able to play and really understand what the sound actually is. So I'm grateful for all these artists for playing ball and letting me kind of tell their story.
How did this all come together? Who came up with the idea? Hey, you know what? I want to do this documentary. I want to do it in a way that hasn't been told. It was a really beautiful story. I want people to understand this. I want people to watch it. It's on HBO now. And the way that you tell it and bring it all together, that's really like the key piece for me here, because having been mixed in with yacht rock for many years and interviewed all of these guys that you had on there and become friends with them, there are pieces that I even I did not know. And so I think anybody that watches this that really thinks that they know yacht rock or that time in musical history, you will learn from this documentary, which was really important. How did this come to be?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate that because when you make these, you want to introduce people to the story, but also you don't want to isolate the people that love this music. So I'm glad people that love this are learning something new and
Yeah.
enjoying it. That's really important to me too. I didn't want to be too inside baseball, but give you enough to keep you interested. So I really appreciate that. But a lot of things happened for this for this to come to fruition. The last documentary I did with HBO was on this musical festival called Woodstock 99, which is a dark story
Mm.
kind of about the horrific events that happened at that festival. So I knew if I wanted to do another one and they wanted me to pitch another music story, I wanted to be a much lighter film and one that really celebrated and showcased music. I was also working on a TV show called Daisy Jones and the Six at the time. So I
Yeah.
was completely immersed in like 1970s Sunset Strip, music scene. Um, but what was interesting is that, I feel like a lot of people romanticize about this time period, but they kind of go towards like the Fleetwood Mac story or the Eagles or the Laurel Canyon story. And I felt like all those stories have been told, but this whole other scene was happening, you know, across the city in these recording studios day and night. And that's these incredible session players making this music that was this like evolution of pop music at the time. Um, and then coincidentally, I met the daughter of Christopher Cross through a friend,
Mhm.
whose best friend is Michael McDonald's daughter. And we're out at a
Scarlet.
bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charlotte. And we were at a bar and they said, why don't you tell us, why don't you talk to our dads and their relationship with this word yacht rock that has come to define their music, 25 years after the fact. And I was like, that is really interesting, and I want to hear from their point of view about what they think of this word and give them a platform to talk about their music and making music in the late 70s. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And my
Mhm.
first interview was that duo interview with Christopher and Michael, and I saw the dynamic of the two of them talking and just their joy of talking about making music during this time. I'm like, okay, we're on to something here. And from there, we got Kenny and the Toto guys, and it just kind of spread like wildfire of people to interview.
When I sat with Mike, I love Mike. Mike's a great guy. And he looked at me, and when I brought up yacht rock, and I hadn't even started my show yet, um, he looked at me and he goes, "Well, you're either yacht or you're not." I go, "Yeah, I'm yacht all the way." Um, Something that people tend to think about when they think about yacht rock is they really put a huge emphasis on the years of 1977 and 1982, when in reality, I cover anything from 1970 to 1991 because I firmly believe that the yacht rock umbrella is much bigger than just those small little years. And I feel like when I watched your documentary, you solidified that for me. And not just the usual yacht rock players that you're thinking about, John Ford, England Dan, John Ford Coley, Ambrosia, Seals and Crofts. But what you did was you took it to this whole other level, which was really important to highlight that yacht rock really would not exist without Black artists.
Oh,
I mean, when you're talking about Ray Parker Jr., he was in radio. James Ingram is a huge part of this. Shaka Khan. I flipped my lid when you mentioned Greg Fillinganes, because Greg Fillinganes has been in this for so long, and I don't think he gets enough recognition. So when you threw Greg's name in there, I was like, yes. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a genre I think that really needed to um, give some kudos to these Black artists, because I cover them a lot on my show. Um,
yep.
you had Brenda Russell,
Yeah,
which was
she's awesome.
really
Yeah.
really cool to see Brenda Russell. Um, Talk a little bit about the jazz, soul, funk aspect of yacht rock and why it was important for you to highlight this in your documentary.
It was really important to me to show, the influence of Black music on these artists. And not just me, it was important for the artists to get across the influence of Black music on their own music. And they wear this influences on their sleeve, right?
Mhm.
And so, and I think, you kind of look at the the timeline of this music and how it evolved. And, really when it became popular again was through hip hop artists in the early 90s. They were sampling these yacht rock, albums. It's because their music was in their parents' record collections. It played on Black radio stations in the late 70s when music was much more segregated because it was so heavily influenced by the music before them. So, it's almost like this full circle thing that happens with
Yeah.
this music, and everybody's influencing everybody. And I think that's the beauty of it. Um, and like again, when we kind of talk about Steely Dan as being kind of the big bang of this music. I mean, Donald Fagen always talks about, jazz music is his influence for their pop music, right? So it makes complete sense. And all these players played on these Steely Dan albums, and they went off and took that sound and evolved it in their own music. So it really all makes sense. And again, I cannot stress the importance of getting, the credit and the respect due to the music that came before them, whether it's R&B, jazz, gospel, or soul. And that was a really important part in the story. And I'm glad it's coming across. And I think the artists appreciate that. And along with, I think along with critics who I think were not nice to this music at the time it was being made and have come around on it too.
Yeah. It was nice to see that you included some of the yacht rock tribute bands,
Yeah.
because I know that my buds just opened up for Kenny Loggins last year on the This Is It tour. Um, Yachtly crew you highlighted. I love that you had Thundercat because when I talked to Mike, I think I interviewed Michael in 2018. We talked about Thundercat in that interview, and to have Thundercat come on and to say how important that was for his career to be, with Michael and Kenny on stage and all of this. You talked about this full circle moment of creating the beginning of this documentary of all of these influences and webbing out from Steely Dan and even all the Toto guys. The Toto guys story is just unbelievable. I love that you had Jay Graydon on there. Jay Graydon is really, really important to yacht rock. A lot of people don't know the history of Jay Graydon, but I talk about him all the time. And then coming full circle at the end, it is true. The Buggles video killed the radio star, MTV. This had a huge impact on that genre of music. And then once people were, you know, in your face on these videos, it was hard for these artists to compete with that. And I love how you just wrapped it up in a beautiful big yacht rock bow for us in this documentary. Is brilliant.
Thank you, Meredith. I appreciate it. I mean, look, there's a beautiful rise, fall, and resurrection to this story.
Mm-hmm.
All these artists, they cannot, still to this day, cannot believe that they're still touring and playing this music, and new generations are discovering it, or a lot of people are rediscovering that might have abandoned it years ago. You know, I talk a lot about, I think this music truly was the soundtrack to our lives, whether you wanted it or not. It's always there, whether it's in supermarkets or pharmacies or doctor's office or elevators or in our parents' car. So I think a lot of us took it for granted, right? And not
Yeah.
really kind of, enjoying what it was. And I'm hoping this film and telling the story of these artists from their point of view will really kind of create a new appreciation for this music that's always been there for us.
How important do you think it was for the mid 90s for this yacht rock YouTube series to come on and these guys to coin this phrase, that kind of encompasses what this is all about? And I love how Steve Lukather goes, "Well, where's my fucking yacht?"
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's true, right? You should have one, Steve. You should. But how important was that? And what do you think happened there? I mean,
I think it just hit, it's one of the earliest viral video series. I think it just hit at the right place and the right time. And I think the biggest thing is it was done out of like respect and love and reverence. The comedians that made this loved this music. And like the stories they created, they didn't have Wikipedia pages. They did their research on like buying the albums and reading the liner notes and seeing all these guys played on each other's albums. And yeah, they kind of created this like alternative history, but they did it out of love. And they had no idea it would catch on. They, in their words, they created a monster. A whole cottage industry came out of this. But you can't deny that it brought a whole new generation of fans into, introducing them to this music. And it was really interesting, Meredith. I had a screening last week at the Grammy Museum where all the artists came and saw it for the first time, the film. And the comedians were there also. And none of them had ever met each other in the 25 years this thing has been made.
wow.
It was the first time. And it was this like, I felt like I was tearing down the wall. Like I bring two countries together because there was hugs and laughter and pictures being taken. And I think, the comedians were always scared. The yacht rockers, hated them. The yacht rockers, never had a chance to meet them. And kind of they've all come around on the word. So it was really beautiful and great. And I'm glad this movie's going to be out there bringing worlds together. And yeah, it was really special. And all the artists loved it. I was so nervous also going into this because you never know,
Yeah.
telling their story. I'm an outsider and they appreciated it and they're excited and they can't wait for it to get out as much as I can.
I was really trying to pay attention to everything, right? And I know you can't fit everything into, I mean, what is it, just over an hour and a half? It's
Yep.
hard to fit everything into that. Do you anticipate maybe doing a part two, or do you think this is it?
I mean, if enough people want it, I guess you never want to shut the door on something. But maybe I'll do like a story on Yachtly Crew and Yacht Rock Review. And then
Oh,
their success now kind of getting the mantle, handing the baton over to them to carry on this music to new generations.
All I'll tell you is if you do a part two, you should highlight some of the radio shows that have started and start with the Yacht Club.
I love
I
it.
will
That's
come
great.
on and we will chat it up. It will be great. Garret, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. I have seen so many documentaries, but I will honestly tell you, my new friend, that I hope this wins an award for you
Oh,
because this is really brilliantly done. And again, anybody watching this, listening, please go to HBO and go to the Yacht Rock, and I love Dock documentary. It's perfect.
thanks, Meredith. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.